Good morning and welcome to this week's recruitment discussion with Jump. And this week we're talking about agency owners don't let 2025 drift away. It's very easy to coast to this time of year. You know, it's summer's coming or summer's here and everyone's feeling the heat. But it's very easy to coast this time of year and then start to crank it up towards the end of the year to sort of hit 2026. So this week we're going to talk about things that we can do differently and things that we should be doing to enable us to get there. Next week, we're going to talk about how we're going to implement these sort of things. So it's going to be an interesting 2 weeks before we have a break for summer. So this week, I'm joined by Paul and Dave. Okay, we've got lots to discuss, I've said, so I'm going to jump in with the first question. Paul, I've tried to dumb the questions down this week after your conversation last week that said they were far too hard, so I've dumbed them down. Yep. The first question is, Janet and John, book one. What did you think?
Well, I'm so glad you've done that.
I've got my certificate here from a professor in Oxford for answering the question.
Well done, Dave. Well done. Okay.
It's amazing what you can get on the internet now, isn't it, Dave?
Indeed. It is. So let's kick off then. So what's the biggest mistake you see recruitment agencies make in Q3, Q4 that stop them actually finishing the year strongly?
Look, I think, you kind of alluded to this point just a second ago, Howard, that, and especially in this year, which is we've seen, it's been a tough year, I think, as everybody knows, and we don't want to bang on too much about that. But I think it's very easy to get yourself into that tunnel where all you're thinking about, frankly, is next Monday's figures or, basic survival. And I think that sort of emotion and focus obviously impacts the people around you, whether you're a small business or a larger business. And then the focus just gets to, let's just get past this year. And I think once you've got that kind of mindset, you stop seeing the opportunities that are around you. You stop looking forward. You stop planning what you're going to be doing in the new year. And to be fair, it's entirely acceptable and understandable. But it's, as you kind of alluded to, it becomes that tunnel vision that prevents you looking beyond a few months' time or the next quarter. And what you'll then find is that, as I've just said, the consultants, the people around you start to act in that fashion. And we get to a point where we're living from hand to mouth, desperately trying to survive each week and each month. And as I've already said, I think that's totally understandable given the current climate we live in. But it does mean that you're not getting your chin off the table, looking around, assessing what's going on in your market, making certain you're close to clients, close to candidates, understanding what's around the corner. And if that becomes, I'm afraid, a position that can really negatively impact your organization. And in the end, I think it comes down to the owners or the leaders of a business that have got to find the time to be understanding where the business is going, where their sector is going, to be able to make adequate plans for the future. And that, I think, is unquestionably the biggest mistake people make, particularly at the end of a year. We'll come back to talking in a moment about how you can avoid that. But I definitely think that is, as you said, Howard, we're into August very shortly. I think we all know we get to September, the kids come back to school and literally, and we say it every year, you blink and it's Christmas again. We're on the edge of that moment. I was just making a meeting for August with another client just a moment ago, thinking, my gosh, end of August, it's like the year is rapidly coming to an end. And it sounds crazy to be saying that in July, but it's exactly how it feels. So you're right to raise this subject about short-term versus long-term thinking. It's important to start thinking about 26, even though we are still in the summer.
Yeah, I think it's scary to think how fast it all moves, but we've all been there before. We all know this is the case. I think for me, the one mistake or the big mistake that people make is not being decisive about what they're going to do. And that indecision has to come from informed decisiveness, if you like. Two things: informed decisiveness. You've got to know what you're going to do as you get ready for 2026, and you've got to make those actions happen in the next few months so that you can roll into the year with the team you've got, with the services you've got, with the customers that you want, or the customers that you want to try and go and secure. It's no good just arriving in the new year, having not done the prep work, having not found out what markets are, having not found out where you're going, having not found out what your customers are intending to do next year. Because now is when many of our customers are planning for next year. So we were with a client yesterday that is in the logistics and warehousing and industrial space, and a part of the work that their contractors are doing are delivering Christmas calendars to their client. Well, because we know that they will need them on the shelves in November. Well, if you take that to any level of program management, any level of work that needs to be done for next year, are you having conversations with your customers about how they are planning for next year? And if you're not, you should be. And once you've got that information, you can make informed decisions about what you need your business to look like as you go into next year, because it's just around the corner.
And I think, Dave, just a quick point before Howard jumps in here. Doing nothing is making a decision. You know, I mean,
Yeah,
we talk
absolutely.
about doing something
Absolutely.
positive or sitting on the fence doing nothing, but literally procrastinating, doing nothing is in itself a decision. And we would all feel strongly that doing nothing is absolutely the worst thing you can do. You know, sitting and waiting and sitting on your hands is a decision. It's a bad decision.
So I went back to sort of think about what I was doing when I was at Computer People and some bigger agencies and stuff like that. And I always thought it was this time of year, July, I start to evaluate my buying clients and my lapse clients. Who's going to be buying next year? Who's not going to be buying next year? Who's actually going to lapse? What's going to go on? I then start to look at the fragility of my client base based on the concentration. My biggest 3 clients, what's the concentration of those compared to my billings? If one of those clients dropped out, what would happen? I also looked at the fragility for the bigger agencies of my bigger billers. What's their concentration? If I lost a big biller in the business, what would that do to me? And then it was about having a business plan that would be about developing new business and what you two were talking about there, innovation of services. I had to sort of thought, what are the clients actually buying and what are we actually selling? And can we match what they want, or can we innovate our services to create something that they want more than other agencies? And I think what you said there, Paul, at the end, there's too many agencies that never make a decision, never do anything because they're happy with what they're doing. And if that's what's happening and other agencies are innovating and are exploring what's happening out there in the marketplace, then they'll take that step forward. And that step forward will put you a step backwards. And all of a sudden, as you're taking the step backwards and they're taking a step forward, that gap gets bigger and bigger. And you suddenly then can't bridge that gap. And I think now is the time that you need to be exploring those type of things to ensure that when we hit 2026, we're on the ground running. We're already up with a pipeline. We're not hoping, it's already there. So let's put that into this question. If a recruitment business owner wants to walk into January with a pipeline ready to convert, what specific pipeline or client activity metrics should they be using or training in Q3 and driving Q4? And how should they hold their team to those metrics?
So it's a great question. It actually takes me back to when I was a branch manager in the early days of Office Angels, and around October, I know we're a bit off that at the moment, but around October, we would start planning our next year's budgets, and you know, what we were told to do, commanded to do, was to go and meet our key clients and indeed any prospect clients that we could get in front of and start talking to them about their plans for the following year, which would inform the budgets that we would then start to put together. And so we had to make a long list of clients that we needed to go and meet. It was done over several months, and I think if memory serves me, we even had a sort of a report we had to fill in per client, even a sort of script, if you like, to determine what our clients' sentiments were for the year ahead or even the first 6 months of the following year. Without that, we were going to write a budget for each of our offices that was basically on a whim and a prayer, you know, just our instinct, which wasn't particularly scientific. it was an interesting experience going out and talking to customers around their plans. And I think many people listening to this will be thinking, our clients don't know themselves what's going to happen next year. And that's a fair point. I think many clients these days are living from 3 months to the next 3 months. We used to plan 3 years ahead. We used to have 3-year targets, 3-year goals, 3-year business plans. Now, often we talk about 3 or 6 month plans. But nevertheless, even if the clients are not yet completely sure about what they're going to be planning to do in the back end of this year and early next year, the fact is we should be asking them those questions and making those plans. So for me, a metric needs to be, if we're going to be sitting down having conversations with our consultants and we're giving them essentially 4 or 5 months to be planning for 26, come August, September, maybe August is a bad month to get sit in front of people for obvious reasons, but from September onwards, we need to have a plan and we can monitor that. Which clients are we going to go and talk to? What are we going to be asking of them? I would like to think that we're going to ask the same questions of every client, because that kind of quantitative information will help us to really evaluate what our plan should be. Our plan should be very reflective of what our customers are telling us. I'd also add to this point and say, talking to clients about their plans is something that's kind of one side of the fence. The other side of the fence has to be heavy duty conversations with candidates, because candidate sentiments will drive the market. I'm always talking about this. If candidates are feeling secure, feeling comfortable, they'll start looking for jobs. And of course, that churn rate is going to assist us to have a successful year ahead. So you can't do one thing in isolation of the other. You have to have two plans, clients and candidate conversations. And I think it does take several months to accumulate that information to help us to understand what next year is going to look like and start to consider where our pipeline is going to come from.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important metrics that I'm not sure everybody looks at, but what for me one of the most important metrics is time to hire. So if you're planning for next year, take a look at your top 20, top 40 clients and work out how long it takes them to hire a candidate from you. Clearly, it's longer on perm than it is on temp or contract, but both measures are really important. And if you've got a top 10 client that's taking 30, 40, 50 days to hire anybody from you, you want to reduce that, because that's better for you, for your candidate in every way. And that may take a conversation. But what better time to have the conversation than now, as you get ready for what you're going to be resourcing, what you're going to be working on next year? Because your top 20 clients should be ones that value the service that you provide and therefore making as fast a decisions as they can. And that's partly up to you to educate them on the market and on the trend, because the market's coming back in many sectors. So candidates are not available for as long as they could be. So it's worth taking a look at the top clients that you're dealing with, and if they're taking longer to say yes to some people, to some candidates, or shorter. And it's important that you know that information as you plan your resourcing and your capacity as you go into next year.
I think I looked at this as a metric and said, everyone measures their pipeline today. What's your pipeline today? How much have you got in your pipeline? 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, whatever it be. What have you got in your pipeline? What's the percentage you're going to convert of that pipeline? We never think about the pipeline if we're now in July. We never think about the pipeline for August. We know vaguely what it is. We've no idea what it's going to be like in September, October, November, and especially no idea what it's going to be like in December and January. However, if you start to talk to clients, and we're going out meeting clients to understand what they're doing, and we start to put into each individual month when that client thinks that they are going to need to increase their staffing levels, whether that be perm, whether it be temp, or whether it be contract, we can start to see what our pipeline is going to look like in the future. We can start to see when that's happening. So I start to think about measuring my January pipeline now. So do I know which number of clients I need to make a placement, or the number of placements I need to hit my target? Have I got those number of clients already in that pipeline in January? It's all right, people just putting it onto their CRM and writing it into their CRM, but is it actually put somewhere specifically where you can look at it, you can measure it, you can drive it? If it is, then we've got to start to think, right, okay, now, if I've got nothing in January, then I've got a certain amount of time before I can start to build that pipeline. And then what you said, Paul, is the other thing that I'd always do is I would match my pipeline to my candidate database. And I'd start to interrogate my candidate database. If my clients are looking for X, Y, and Z, have I got candidates that can deliver X, Y, and Z? Because if I can start to pre-populate my client base, a candidate base, then all of a sudden I can start to take candidates to the market and then maybe force clients to make a decision before January. And we were talking about it yesterday, Dave, weren't we, with a client? If you think about now, if you start to understand what your client wants and you're supplying just temp and you're not supplying perm, but if they've got, say, 25, 30 people in a perm division, even at 20% attrition rate, on 30, that's 6 perm roles. When are there those likely roles to come in? What's going to happen, for those roles? And all of a sudden you can start to build a pipeline of credibility, but you need to have a candidate pipeline to actually be able to fill that. So I start to build that now, but then once I start to get into that habit, it should be the habit that's kept throughout the whole year. Because we can start to build forward-thinking pipelines, we will know when we're going to have fallow months, we'll know when we're going to have massive months, we'll know what our clients actually want, and therefore we can start to deliver a better service to them. Because if I can take a candidate today to a client, let's think, you talked about fill rates there, Dave. We've got August, dead month. That means September, by the end of September, we could have gone through the recruitment process. Let's say they've just got a month's notice. That means November, they could start mid-November. That's only 2 months away from October, but that might be the perfect candidate, won't be available in October. In January. So it means that we can start to push things forward and push things a little bit quicker. And that means understanding what our clients actually want rather than just marketing a candidate and hoping that candidate fits. Yeah. It's a very sort of slightly different way and work from there. So let's put that, because there's a lot of people on this call that's sort of smaller businesses, etc. So let's say look at founders at between sort of 1 to 5 to 10 heads. Founders that are probably still heavily billing. What's the one negotiable action that they must take in Q3 and Q4 to move towards creating a consistent pipeline and growth without creating fear or burnout?
So, I mean, from a non-negotiable perspective, Howard, I had a conversation with a client this morning who's got thankfully, a very decent statement of work contract now. But we both know it's what you would term a cash cow, that there's an opportunity here for a period of time, but it's not going to last forever. It's unsustainable. Going to make money out of it, and it's great. And I think not only will we make money out of it, but it's going to prove to be a great case study, a great opportunity to learn how to manage SOWs really well, which is great. Delighted, but it's not going to sustain the business model. And I think to your point here, it's recognizing that. I think as a business owner of a small business where you're billing heavily, your head's down, you're focused on trying to get money made. Okay, there's not a lot of choices around that if you're a small business, but I think it's about the ability to step back and just smell the air a little bit, a reality check. Is what you're doing sustainable? Is it going to be the foundation for the next 12, 18 months? Because if the answer to that is no, and in many instances it is no, a lot of what we do is transactional, or it's got a limited shelf life. If you know that, and I think, people know that, business owners know that, whilst it's important to try to make the money that you can whilst you have the opportunity, there is also an imperative here, and that is to step back, smell the air, recognize that what you're doing may be valuable for the short term, but if in 6 months' time, 9 months' time, that business is gone, how are you going to replace it? What are you going to do about it? And you can't think as a business owner or a leader of a business, I'll deal with that when the time comes, because that is suicide. You have to step back and think, this isn't going to last forever. I have to think very hard about where the next opportunity or opportunities are going to come from. If you have staff, then it's about looking around you. Who's going to help me find new opportunities? How are we going to get out there and start talking to other clients? Because I think here's the point that's very valid here, that you cannot replace business overnight. It takes a period of time. We all know that. Talking to customers, potential customers, upselling, cross-selling to existing customers, you've got to be looking at a period of 6 to 9 months at least before any new business is likely to come about. If you get luckier beforehand, great. But the stark reality is it takes time. So you've got to be putting aside time and effort, even if you're extremely busy with existing customers, to look for new opportunities, because if you've recognized that what you have is a moment in time, it's not going to be there forever, you've got to find time, no matter what it takes, pirate time, to go out and find new opportunities. A couple of hours a day, whatever it takes, directly from your own experience and your own effort, or through the combined effort of those around you, is something that's an imperative, non-negotiable, to come back to your phrase.
It's a good phrase, isn't it? Non-negotiable. I think for me, if you're running a business and you've got a few staff, often a smaller business, the best biller, the biggest biller is the founder. If your ambition, and it comes back to what you want for your business, if your ambition is to scale your business, a non-negotiable is in the time that you have to develop the people who you've got working for you. Because some of those people will also be the ones that will go and find new business. And often we meet owners who are absolutely first class and brilliant at customer relationships, brilliant at delivering the business, but it's still the two owners. You know, they'll hire a couple of people, but it doesn't work out because they haven't had the time to develop them or train them well. They may get to 3 or 4, then one leaves, and still they stay at 1 or 2. Whereas if you really want to scale your business and grow, absolutely maintain those customer relationships, but bring in people, train them, develop them, make them better, and then get them to go out and get some business. And you maintain those relationships, of course you do, and you will continue to grow the business. But ultimately, if you want to scale and grow your business, it can't just be 1 or 2 of you still on the tools. You've got to bring in people and develop them. So my non-negotiable would be make sure that in your week that you are spending time developing your number 2s, 3s, 4s, and whatever it will be.
So besides the non-negotiable statement, there's been some other great statements today. Get your chin off the table. Pirate time. Some great statements there. So the conversation is get your chin off the table. And I think that get your chin off the table is all about this. It's about doing business development every single day into your existing clients, your lapsed clients, and your new clients, and making sure that you are doing business development every single day to get better quality clients into your business. And that means with the clients that you're working with now, I used to, at this time of year, play the what if game. What if that client doubles? What if that client carries on at the same level? What if that client stops? What do we know what's going to happen? And if we didn't have an answer to those 3 questions, we had a gut feeling what was happening in those 3 questions, then you always took the worst case scenario. What if that client stops? And what we tended to find that out of the X number of clients that we were dealing with, quite a high percentage we didn't know enough about, and therefore we had to take it that client was going to stop recruiting from us. And that put the fear of God into us and drove that business development into our buying clients, our lapsed clients, and then opened up that opportunity to say, well, in that case, we really understand that this percentage of clients are going to stop working with us. Therefore, we need to replace those clients straight away. And as Paul said, it takes time to replace a client that stops. And if you think it stops today, it probably takes you 6 to 12 months to properly replace that client's revenue stream with a better client or a different client. So if we go today and start to look to replace our client base that we don't know anything about or know very little about, then suddenly what you'll suddenly find that in January, you've got a very big pipeline coming through because you've got lots of new clients. And if your existing client base carry on, then all of a sudden you're doubling the size of your pipeline, your potential and your opportunity. But if you do what Paul says and just carry on working with your same clients, just thinking and hoping that they're going to carry on billing, then you could be into a big shock that if all of them decide to stop, you've got a problem. And then you're trying to fix that problem. And I've had 2 people talk to me this week about that very big issue on Monday, where they've had a set number of clients that they deal with and they've all stopped recruiting. They haven't done business development for 2 years and they're wondering what to do. So it's a big problem. It's just something that we did. So let's look at that from a bigger size agency. So many agencies sort of like with 10 to 50 heads often say that they're too busy to fix underperformance issues. So what would you say is the toughest conversation they need to have with their teams before September that will build momentum and create opportunity in Q4, and that will build the right habits required to have a really, really big 2026.
I think this point about quote unquote too busy to fix underperformance is just, it's not acceptable, to be blunt. You have to fix underperformance. Too many recruitment businesses, and we've all seen it many times, put sticking plasters over this issue. You know, what they'll do is they'll bring in other people, for example. So they build more cost into their business. They bring in other consultants rather than deal with the issue of the fact they've got people in their business who are not performing at a decent level. You know, I think given the current market circumstances, you know, we have to be realistic about what reasonable to decent performance looks like. I'm still aware of consultants billing very some amazing figures even in this market. What does reasonable to acceptable look like in your sector, given your costs and so forth? But if people consistently underperform, the answer isn't to bring in other people. The answer is to fix what you've got. Either you get reasonable performance, acceptable performance from people, or you have to consider you have to remove those people over a period of time. Having underperforming staff is unacceptable over a consistent period of time. Every consultant, and we've all been there, will have periods where things just don't go for them. That's normal. And we'll carry on working very hard supporting those people, provided they're trying really hard and they're doing everything they can. But if you've got people that are simply not performing and there are reasons that are unacceptable for that underperformance, if you cannot move them in the direction of performing reasonably to well or doing a decent performance, you're going to have to consider letting them go, especially in these current times. You can't carry people. So I'm not sure I buy into I'm too busy, it's too difficult to deal with underperformance. I think you have to deal with that. And your point's valid, Howard. At what point are you going to do that? If you're planning for next year already, as you should be, then are you prepared to allow that underperformance to carry on into next year? And my answer is absolutely not. So I think this is something that has to be dealt with. I think it comes down to coaching and development and training, but it certainly comes down to understanding the mindsets of those people. And I think the opposite is also true, Howard. We've talked about this many times. You can have big billers in a business who are, as we've often described, you know, internal terrorists, and they're causing problems in the business. Those people also, in terms of behaviors, need to be spoken to. Now, hopefully this is not a major issue for any business. Let's hope not. But it's burying your head in the sand. And again, as I said earlier, doing nothing is a decision. If you're doing nothing around those issues, then you have to address them. And I think burying your head in the sand, hoping it's all going to be okay, is not an answer.
Yeah, I think I'm like you, Paul. I am absolutely sure that I don't get that bit about being too busy to deal with underperformance. Now is the time to use that phrase that we've used as a team many times, to get the right people on the bus. You want to be entering into the final quarter knowing you've got the right people who are performing at the right levels. And just so I'm clear, if you're running a business between 5 and 50 people, we're not here just talking about salespeople and resourcing people. We're talking about people who may be in finance, they may be in IT, they may be in HR, they may be in marketing. They could be across the business,
Yep.
and they're not performing at the level. And now's the time to do something about it, because you want to enter into the final quarter to get ready for your new year to 2026 with the right people. And the reality is, if you've got the data to show that someone is underperforming and you know the way the market is going, then you need to act on it. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean fire them all.
No.
What it could mean is, let's talk to see what remedies we can put in place, see what support they need, and start to do that and get that done in the next 6 to 8 weeks. And if there's no change in attitude, in behavior, in belief, then you know you've got an issue to deal with and you have to get it done. And go back to my first point about one of the issues that many leaders face is they're just not decisive enough. They vacillate, they sit there and think this behavior, this performance will change, and it doesn't, and they haven't dealt with it. So now's the opportunity to take a look, to see what remedies can be put in place. If they can be done, do it. If not, then you need to make a decisive action. So you've got the right people. Because whilst you may know they're underperforming, absolutely the rest of your staff do. and they're probably looking at you going, why isn't that not being dealt with? It doesn't matter where in the business that performance or underperformance sits.
It's just worth making a quick point. Sorry, Howard, just a quick point here. It's worth making the point. We know when we talk to our candidates that there are a lot of people out there that are working in businesses because they feel reasonably secure. They're not happy though. They're only hanging in because they're nervous about changing jobs. I would suggest that there are people with that mindset in our industry. They're working in businesses because it's a job, it feels reasonably secure, but they're not actually bought into the business any longer. They're not happy, and they will jump when they feel that the market's better and that they feel more comfortable about changing jobs. I don't think a business any business, especially in this current tough market, can have people that are physically in their business but mentally they've checked out. So this is a broader subject because we need to look at why they've checked out. Are we giving correct leadership? Are we giving them the right visions and so forth for the future? But having passengers is not good enough. You can't have that in your business. Sorry, Howard.
So let's move on because there's lots to talk about. So my answer to the question there is I think we're at the bottom of the curve and we're starting to move up. And the way that most businesses address underperformance is to cut the dead wood. When I think the most important thing is to address the two reasons that create underperformance, and that is usually mindset and the lack of capability of the consultant. So we've got to start to think about how we address mindset and how we train our consultants to deliver a better performance. And therefore, we've got to start to look at ourselves in the mirror and what are we doing to address mindset and training, rather than just cutting deadwood thinking that will fix underperformance, because it doesn't. We've got to start to think we've got to do the right things. So I'd say we're running quick on time. We've got 3 more questions to ask, so we need to speed up a bit, guys. Okay. So question, how do you balance keeping your team focused on billing in Q4 while preparing them for 2026?
We always used to set incentives for the back end of the year. So I would look at, what do I think the run rate is for the business? What do I think that we're going to achieve by the end of the year from a revenue perspective? And obviously already be planning for the new year. And we want a pump for the end of the year. We want to finish strongly. So I would look at this moment, bonus incentives. We would look at competitions, at stretch goals. What do we think we're going to achieve? How do we get beyond that point? And that actually had nothing to do necessarily with the budget that had been set for the year. This was based on the reality. Where are we now? What does our run rate look like reasonably? How do we get it beyond that run rate? And I would look at incentives for that. But at the same time, we'd also look at incentives for getting placements made or contract attempts out for the new year. So I think it comes down, we know that, to be quick on this point, we know that behaviors are driven by incentives and bonus plans. So I think as a business, I'm looking at planning. We talked earlier about talking to clients and candidates, but also how do I get my people to stretch, to really push on, and what's gonna generate that excitement? How are we going to get them up for it?
And as a leader, what are you modeling to your team about where you are spending your time? So take a look at your diary, take a look at your calendar, and just see how much of your calendar is customer facing, business development, strategy work, honing your services, all the things that matter now. Of course they do, but also will be mattering for the new year. And remove stuff that isn't really fitting in with that, and then encourage the people who work alongside you or the people who work for you to do the same. Because it's very easy to get lost in internal meetings, in the things that don't really involve candidate development or client development. And that's the sort of thing you need to be working on as you go into Q4 to start off with a good to start off with a good 26.
So I think what I see with most recruitment agencies is they've got that very eyes down approach. What's happening today? And it's all about today. There isn't an eyes up approach about what's coming down the channels and what actually January looks like and what 2026 looks like. So they've got no idea how they're actually going to finish the year other than what pipeline they've got today. And they've not got any idea how they're going to start the year because they're not actually reviewing that. So I think they've got to go from an eyes down approach to an eyes up approach. And that goes back to one of the earlier questions about building out your pipeline month to month to month to month, but build it in advance so you can see what's going on. And that way you get rid of that eyes down approach, because you might be a consultant that's not having a bad day today, but in 3 months' time, they've got a massive amount of work coming in from their clients, but they don't even know that because they haven't actually started to log it and haven't started to really understand how much work is coming through from there. So I think we've got to remove that eyes down approach and focus on an eyes up approach. I'm going to put this as a question to agencies that have management teams, so usually sort of 20 heads or plus, but I'm also going to put it down to other agencies smaller than that and how they create things. So what's the thing that you would change in a board or an SLT meeting to create cadence or focus during Q4 to create the urgency without creating chaos? Because I think sometimes when we get to the end of the year, it becomes a bit chaotical. So what are we doing as managers, leaders, especially when they've got, you know, an SLT board or a board of directors, to create the right cadence for focusing on Q4?
Look, I think it comes down to facts. You've got to be looking, I mean, what metrics are you looking at? What data are you looking at? What goes on in your meetings? And, you know, for me, it's about making sure that you're looking at the key metrics, not talking about airy-fairy stuff. It's actual fact. The information you're looking at is accurate, that you're looking reasonably at what your projections are, and you're focused on the key things. We often talk in these conversations about, you know, is what we're going to do going to make the car go faster? And I think that's an important point. Make sure that the meetings are, that the conversations are relevant, that you're focused on the key drivers in the business. Base your information and your conversations on the facts, not on emotion. Emotion plays no part in conversations at board level, SLT level, on facts. And what are the details? What are the actions that we can take in a very short period of time that can make an adjustment to the business, to where it's going, to its travel? Who's going to own it over what time period? So there's got to be actionable outcomes to the conversations, not sort of just conversations, but actionable stuff. And to my mind, I think that comes down to the way these meetings are structured, who's leading them, making sure there are minutes and notes afterwards, people are held to account for the things they said they were going to do, and that there's monitoring systems between the meetings to make sure that things get achieved. I know this is all fairly basic stuff, but how many of us have sat in meetings over the years where a huge amount of conversation goes on? When you reflect on them afterwards, you think, well, what did we actually achieve? Who's doing what? And what are the outcomes over what period of time? So I think you've got to look at how you structure your meetings and what you're looking at from a factual perspective. And that's not about emotion. It's not about causing upset or excitement. It's fact. Let's generate actions based on facts.
I'm going to just use an old quote and change it. So back in Bill Clinton's days, James Clavell came up with a very famous quote. It's the economy stupid. For me, it's the customer stupid. How much time are you spending in the next few weeks or months with your customers? What are they doing? How are they buying? What services do they value? What do they want from you? Look at your diary and measure the time that you're spending on getting that information. Because with that information, you can make informed decisions about how many people you need to hire. Sadly, if there's people you need to lose as well, but so that your business is efficient to meet the demand that's coming. And even in an unchanging market, it's still more important that you're spending time with your customers, that you know that people who work for you are spending time with the right level of people on their customer sites. And you can use that data to inform how you're going to run the business. It doesn't matter whether there's 2 of you or 222 of you.
So I'm going to take your customer stupid comment and change that again to consultant stupid. And what I mean by that is that as managers, and certainly our junior managers, we spend more time with our worst performing consultants, when actually we should be spending more time with our top performing consultants. If you lose a poor performing consultant, it doesn't really hurt you that much. hurts you in the long term. But if you lose a top performing consultant, it hits you straight away and hurts straight away. So to me, as an SLT, to create cadence in those meetings and create cadence out there into Q4 without creating chaos, I would be looking after my big performers. I'll be starting to work really heavy with my top performers, because they more than likely are looking after your top clients, and therefore they're looking after your top revenue streams. So the training and developments that you need to help those people grow and develop with your business should be starting to implement, but they should feel like they have been loved by their management team and they're loved by their management line. And therefore I would have that conversation about what we're doing with our clients, what we're doing with our how we're innovating our services, etc. But what are we doing with our top performers to keep our top performers absolutely tied into the business? And I think that's where it comes. And if you start to think about how any business, you kill momentum in a business, if a top performer leaves, it kills momentum for a certain period of time. And therefore, I think training your SLT, your management line, to hire the right people, but then look after those people within the business, that is uber critical. And so I think we've got to sort of have that view of, yes, let's look after the clients, but at this moment in time, it's looking after your consultants, especially your top ones, because they will then in turn look after your clients, and that will come full circle down to you. So what would you include on a one-page 2026 plan for agency owners, and how can they test the key assumptions before the year end?
So, I mean, Howard, I think I'm going to pick up on the point you just made, because I think you'd almost put 3 columns on that one page, and one would say clients. We've talked a lot today about really getting close to clients. It's non-negotiable. Understand what's going on with their businesses. The second column would be about the candidates. We've talked a lot today about that point, making sure that we're close to candidates, their sentiments when they want to change jobs, and indeed what's going on in their present employers. But the third part is the point I'm going to pick up with you, Howard, which is, how do our people feel? Because you're absolutely correct in saying that if you look after your people and they're bought into the vision of the business, where it's going, and they're motivated, they're passionate about the company, then that comes full circle, as you said, and they look after you. You cannot really look at a business plan for next year and only think about clients and candidates, because the most important column are the people that work for you, work with you. And if they are turned on and you've got them on side, they're motivated, they can see opportunities, they're excited, you can get them to walk through walls. You're prepared to walk through walls, but you're not going to be able to build your business unless you've got your people on side. So I think there's 3 elements to this, and you picked that up very well. I think it's about making sure, very importantly, that your own people are really bought into what you're trying to achieve in the next 12 to 18 months.
For me, it's putting onto a page 3 questions and then also putting the answers on the page as well. So what do you offer that your customers value? How do you know that they value it? And what is happening with your customers' business and how is it changing? And you need a really good comprehensive answer from the account manager, the customer owner, however you run your business, to those 3 questions to be able to plan accurately and intelligently for what you need to be doing as you get ready for 2026. So that will be my one sheet with those 3 questions for each of my consultants, or however your business is structured.
I think I take all what you guys have put then, and part of that will be all on that one-page plan. I think the big thing that happens at the end of the year is motivation dips, motivation dries up, motivation becomes hard. Summer's a hard place because August is always Christmas is a hard place. It's always hard to get hold of clients, etc. So we've got to look at how we can get long-term motivation, and that's by having a stronger purpose. So I would be readdressing my why we're doing this. And I don't think it's about having that one big why, because I don't think that works for everybody. I think it's having a lot of little whys, and it's all of those little whys that create the momentum. And once you understand your why, then we can understand what you were talking about there, Dave. What your clients buying, what are we selling to the clients, what do they need? We can look at how we can evolve our solutions. We can look at building a better client strategy, etc. But I think the criminal thing that happens is we tend not to have a real drive back into our purpose, back into what actually motivates people consistently. And if we start to do that, then we're back to there. So it doesn't matter whether you're a solo business or whether you're a large multi-business, okay? Everyone understanding that why and being on that same page is absolutely imperative. And then it's about that development of those people. So even as a solo business, if you're not developing yourself, then how are you going to grow? As a large business, if you're not developing your people, how are you going to grow? So I think there's a lot of things that we can put onto that plan. But I think if you want to keep it simple, you've got to say, what's your big purpose? What's your big why? What's all the little whys that go with it? Then client, candidate, and consultant. What's your plans for each one of those? And then drive it from there. So I think it's been a really interesting discussion today. And I think next week, when we talk about how we're going to implement these things that we've talked about today, I think that's going to make it even more rounded for everybody to say, how would you put those things into place? What would you do to put those things into place? So thanks very much for attending. Dave, Paul, thanks for your
Thank
input.
you.
If you haven't, or over, I suppose, summer, you want to find out how to do things a little better, why not visit our YouTube channel? Sign up to our YouTube channel, have a look at all the past webinars. There's loads that will help you build your business. Have a look at our podcast, Recruitment Leaders Unlocked. There's some really great information from past recruitment leaders up there. And there's free training on the YouTube site. There's over 68 free videos on training if you want to upgrade your staff, if you haven't got any cash to upgrade your staff. So, ladies and gents, thanks for your time, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Dave and Paul, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Have a super week.
Have a good week, everybody.
Bye, everybody.